Donovan, can we see Ann? I mean, does the meeting software allow for that? Me, I put my picture up once.
It does, but that speaks specifically to the point that Cheryl was just making, is that it's really designed for everyone to be online. So I could certainly activate the camera on my laptop right here, and then Ann would get to see me, which would be awesome. But
because you'd stick your tongue out at me all the time when no one was looking.
But I don't know if that really satisfies what you're talking about.
Well, open meeting laws, which we don't use. Open meeting laws say that the person attending electronically must be seen by everyone in the room, and she must be able to see everyone in the room.
Right. So now you're talking about some kind of setup with cameras at every place tied together somehow through some device.
Or somebody being able to track that person.
Right.
But then you miss Ann when Mary Kay's talking.
Actually, what we do is prop up an iPad and turn the camera on.
Right. So that is possible. It's not real. Yeah, it's not real doable with this software, or really I think most online meeting software in general. At that point, you're talking more about video conferencing, which is similar in a lot of ways, but it is a distinctly different kind of approach to the meeting. So the online meeting paradigm starts with some people online and some people in the meeting.
Well, I think one quick thing, if I get Charlie. I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, and maybe you've done this at times because I haven't been, if the staff needs to play a wild card at times and say we're definitely going to meet next month, even if the agenda is small, and let us know when that comes that you're hoping we can come to a decision at that meeting on that particular topic, because that might force people to really be thinking about it more and talking about it, or prepared that when they come in that we're trying to come to a consensus. And and that might be so that we don't slow some process way down that didn't need to be way down.
I can certainly be more honest.
Because there's some things that doesn't.
Does anyone else have any further comments regarding the meeting structure?
Yeah, was it helpful, Taylor?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are a bit behind here, so let's move on to the year in review, and maybe we could do the 5 minutes of the 10-minute year in review.
So in the packet that was put online, there is a lengthy document of achievements. I'm not going to go through all of those because there's 30 of them. But Cheryl and I worked together and picked out a few that we thought were especially worth talking about. So we're just going to run through those real quick. Cheryl, you're up first.
Okay, so this is just sort of a highlighting some of the things that, we do some of these behind the scenes, and they take a ton of time and they take a ton of effort. There's a lot of testing that goes involved, and I don't think we always think about those or even talk about those. And so this is this is one of those. So when we transition to RDA for cataloging, all those, when you hit F2 in Horizon and you get all those indexes, those had to be re-indexed to account for the new RDA function. That meant a lot of me kicking off indexes at 9 o'clock at night when your libraries were closed and checking on them at 7 in the morning and 6 in the morning and pausing them so that the day could go on and then restarting them for the next night. So it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of testing that goes involved to make sure that they're working, but without them, we wouldn't see some of the benefits that we're seeing from RDA, or some of the benefits we're supposed to be seeing one day from RDA. Okay. And this is another thing related to RDA. This happened this past year. We transitioned all of our libraries, all 90 locations on Horizon. If you wanted to catalog in Horizon, you had to come to training. You had to come to a face-to-face training and learn the new methods. There's a lot that goes involved with doing training, especially when you're transitioning from one set of standards to another. And there were a lot of resources that went into all those trainings, and when you say we would have had to train over the course of a year, and we had classes across the hall in the training lab that were full. We had a couple classes where we even had to bring another table in because there weren't 10 people and there's only 9 computers in there. We had, sometimes there were classes where both me and Becky were in there helping. Sometimes it was Becky and Christy, sometimes it was Becky and Chris, sometimes it was me and Chris. And we had to have multiple people in there to do all this training. And that doesn't even account for all the time that you all spent to come to training and learn all of this and then implement it. And this is another thing. We kind of tend to report very frequently that, yeah, we brought on 2 new schools, or we brought on 3 new schools. Well, this past year we actually brought on 3 new schools. We brought on Glenville and St. Charles High School last January, and then over the summer we brought on Red Wing. And that's, again, Red Wing High School. That's a lot of space. We're transitioning it to our database. We're testing a lot of things, and we're loading a lot of stuff in. And then those schools are doing a lot of work of cleaning up their data and rebarcoding 10,000 items in the case of Red Wing. So. And again, I mentioned the training before, but this is more of a general training. We conducted 25 sort of training classes across the hall. That's circulation that Tyler and Rachel teach. That's cataloging 1 and 2, and then a serials class or 2. And that doesn't account for the road shows that take an enormous amount of effort and time. But all those things take a lot of prep work. It isn't just the 3 hours. It's the 4 hours beforehand to make sure your notes are accurate, to refresh yourself of what you're going to be teaching, to print everything out. It's the 3-4 hours of taking training. It's the rest of the day after training where you're kind of brain dead. And then it's all the questions you get from your students.
I think you were going to do this one.
Okay, so this I covered at Tuesday's meeting at the end of last year. Before, we didn't meet in December, and this all happened right at early December. Migrating the credit card payment system, we moved from using our own hosted servers in Visionware and PCI Charge. We're now using PayPal through Enterprise and Authorize.net for our self-checks. This was done in December, and it was a lot of moving parts coming together. It was me working on Enterprise, it was Mike working on the self-checks, and it was Amy handling all the financial transactions and data in the background. And it took a lot of time, but it also provides a lot more of a benefit to your patrons as everything is more streamlined in Horizon. So this was a huge, I think a huge accomplishment because it allowed us to shut down a couple servers. It moved us more to a hosted solution. The amount of time that ain't worry about PCI compliance anymore saves us a lot.
I mentioned earlier in the project report we're getting ready for bandwidth increases. Of course, we do that every year. So in 2014, we increased the bandwidth at 19 online libraries. That is more than we usually do. We made a deliberate effort to be more aggressive in improving bandwidth. So in some cases, such as Bucket Memorial, we upgraded them to 100 megabytes. We are trying to be more aggressive in upping the bandwidth wherever we can within the RLTA funding and the E-rate program. And we're going to continue that this year. This is a project that also got talked about a little bit yesterday at the users group, or 2 days ago at the users group meeting. We have a situation in Casson Public Library where they are being bombarded with copyright infringement notices from their internet server. Many of the libraries get these. For reasons that are unclear, KMTEL is taking them a little more seriously than most internet service providers do, and has been very aggressive with the library. So we worked with them starting in January of 2014 to carry out a number of steps. The splash screens is just one of them, where we worked with them to review their acceptable internet use policy, improve their signage, set up these splash screens so that any patron using their Wi-Fi, even on a personal device, will have to go through a screen that talks about piracy and the fact that it's illegal. And we've carried out some other steps with them. So this has been a full year process. I've been to their board twice to talk over options with them. And it's been a fairly lengthy process. And hopefully we're getting to the point where they'll be in the clear soon. We replaced the Blade server array that hosts all of our virtual servers. And I'm really proud to say that we did that with no downtime for the online libraries. The year before, 2014, we replaced the storage area network. You may recall that. This year, we are getting ready to replace the switches. So in that 3-year period, we will have replaced pretty much everything in our server room except for the cables. And that's very exciting. Some of that equipment is starting to show its age a little bit. Some of the downtime that we had suffered a couple of years ago in that really bad year that we had was directly attributable to that. So I feel like we've done a lot of work in the last few years to upgrade our infrastructure. And I think we're seeing the benefits this year where we've had very little downtime, at least very little downtime that stemmed from our facilities. Internet service providers go down sometimes, and we can't do much about that. And that was it. So there's a whole lot of other stuff on that list as well. I'll be happy to take any questions or comments on anything on that list.
I have something.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with the hats off. I shared it with our library staff, our library board. We often just talk about at the library board that you provide computer support, that you provide the support system that makes it easy for us to do our jobs. But this list was great to share with them. You are deservedly proud. You deserve to be very proud of a really great year.
Well, thank you, Ann. Appreciate that.
Any more questions, comments? If not, we'll move on to Collection HQ. Cheryl.
Okay. So Collection HQ is the software name for the grant that we got back in June, that started in June. It's an LSTA grant, and the grant was written to allow us to, the purpose was to test out Collection HQ software and get feedback from pilot libraries. We had 5 pilot libraries, and what we were hoping to discover was if you look at your collections and you're using this data software, what data-driven decisions that you're using the software to get, how are those helping you manage your collection better? And then we also were trying to figure out, is this something we want to continue past the pilot libraries and have all, this is only offered to public libraries, so the 37 public libraries use. At this point, we are in the 6 months, so we're at the midterm report of this grant. It will end at the end of June. And I just wanted to take a moment, since we're halfway through the project, to start about it and list some accomplishments and discuss it a little bit, since 4 of the 5 pilot libraries are on ILS ops, and 3 of them are in the room. But I won't single any of you out.
You know who you are.
But I will ask for input. So what has this project accomplished so far? So what we've gotten so far is that we've set up the installation of the software, and that means we've sent a whole lot of data to Collection HQ so that they could implement instances for each of the public libraries. And those 5 libraries have access to it, and they're in there now running reports and looking at things. This also has come with, in order to set this all up, there was a lot of data back and forth, and we had to get a bunch of things set up on a server so that stuff happens automatically. So all that pretty much happened from July to, I think, mid-September-ish. Then we had some collection development training for staff here at SELCO through the American Library Association. That was written into the grant. And then we brought that person into SELCO, Peggy Johnson, from the University of Minnesota, for her to do a workshop. It was an all-day workshop. It was open to everybody in the region. And the pilot libraries were sort of forced to attend. So the pilot libraries came to that. And then after that point, once all the data was set up sort of in mid-September, that's when we started receiving our online training for the Collection HQ software from Collection HQ. Maybe not the best trainer in the world, but at least it's recorded so you can go back and watch it. And then at that point, we worked on a schedule of reports that Ingold, our project person, has. And now we're sort of in the second phase of the project, where what we really need are the libraries to run the reports, the designated reports on the schedule, and provide us feedback. Because we have to write that feedback into the grant, give that to the state, and we need that feedback to have a conversation about how useful this is going to be as a region for everybody. So far, some of the feedback we have gotten is that there is definitely a learning curve to the software. It isn't the most intuitive right off the bat. There's a lot of setup that goes along with it. But what we've heard is that if you dedicate a couple hours to the software, it's really useful, and it ends up being more helpful than one person said web reporter. So, but keeping in mind that web reporter is different than Collection HQ, right? Web reporter is meant to look at our data across the database. It allows you to, because we're all in the same database. Collection HQ is set up for Chatfield. It is set up for Owatonna. You can't see Chatfield, and Chatfield can't see yours. So it is designed to do something different. But also, unlike web reporter, what we've heard as some good feedback is one library is really thrilled with some of the acquisitions functionality. That's not something you get in web reporter. So this is suggestions on what you should buy. Maybe letting you know areas of your collection that are overstocked and understocked is the terminology that Collection HQ uses. It is taking our holds data from Horizon and analyzing sort of what your patrons are placing lots of requests on and what you need to buy more copies of. It gives you a list of popular authors, which one library said they really like looking at the popular authors and getting down to, past the James Pattersons and the Janet Ivanovich, get to page 10. Oh, that person's popular here. I didn't realize that. It compares sort of your collection to other collections of similar size worldwide. And then there's a functionality in there called top titles, which I know of one library, who's in this room, who has used something like that to identify gaps in their collection. They were missing a classic book. Is that what it was? You were missing. You weren't calling.
Welcome to my world.
Still a mockingbird? Are you serious? No. Sorry. Yeah, I was giving James a hard time.
I like Pride and Prejudice and that crap that I don't read. Right?
So
Just
there
kidding, folks. All literature is valuable.
So no, in all seriousness, there have been a couple libraries that have said they have used sort of those top titles and those popular things to identify discrepancies in their collection. But all those positive things being said, we're still not seeing sort of the buy-in that we really need from the pilot libraries. And I know that it's a busy time of the year, but we're not going, when we get to the end of the year and we have to write the grant write-up, there's going to be some difficulties with the project report if we don't get the feedback we need from the library.
And I can take it.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Let's not put Cheryl on the spot. So we have a mid-project report that is due at the end of this month. We are already prepared to acknowledge to the state library that it was, difficult setup, that people haven't necessarily, there was a learning curve to get started. We will have to report that we are behind schedule in running the designated reports on a designated. So one of the things that we will be doing with each of the pilot libraries, I want to make sure that the 5 pilot libraries still want to be pilot libraries. When they committed earlier on, the schedule was not well known, local events maybe had not transpired the same way as people thought. So if we need to change the pilot libraries, we should do so now so we can tell the state library, here were our 5, and they simply cannot fulfill their obligation. We've talked as a staff, as we have libraries that do pull out, would we need to fill in with some other libraries? So that constitutes some problems because another whole set of issues, because if there's a steep learning curve, it's going to be just as steep for the new libraries and even a shorter window because the grant ends officially, we can't get an extension June 30th. So we will have to work with the state library to see what accommodations they will allow us to make. The state library is becoming much more detailed specific in managing these grants. Whether they indicate that this is because the Institute of Museums and Library Services in Washington, D.C. is much of a stickler. But certainly I have some concerns that we will, after having purchased this $35,000 piece of software for this year of this project, that we don't have a significant amount of, having met a significant amount of the specific grant plan, that they will say, we are only going to fund you for a portion of it. We'll prorate our reimbursement. That's how we found that is what happened on the educational learning database. They prorated our reimbursement. So hence my concern that as we write this mid-year report, I will be honest and say we had some delays, but we have a piece of paper that we will be sending on delivery, and for those of you who are here today, if you are ready to tell us yes, you will continue, fine. And if you really want out, that's okay too, but we need to know in January, not in you really need to participate. So,
is there an opportunity, or can other library staff be helpful in any way to these public libraries? I mean, are there some hurdles that can be overcome through cooperating?
I don't think so, because of the nature, as Cheryl was explaining, that this really is work that happens within that library, correct?
Yes, yeah. We have.
But could it be something like sending over staff to help with something else so that it frees up time, or something like that?
Well, what's really needed, and Cheryl will correct me if I'm getting this wrong, is there are sets of reports that need to be run on a certain timetable. And that's really what we're talking about, and we're not seeing it happen. So I don't know if that's something that another library can really help with.
Okay, so it's running the reports and then hopefully doing something with them, but for whatever reason the actual reports aren't even being run.
That is correct.
Okay.
And that's what's causing us the most concern. Because actually the grant project does not require specific actions to be taken on the collections, although we certainly hope that improvements to the collections will happen. The real measurable output that we have is that these reports need to be run, and the feedback from the library is solicited as to the usefulness of the software. Is it worth the effort that goes into running the reports, that kind of thing.
Okay, okay.
As much of that as we need, so we can't document it.
And we do, and we do have a part-time person that was written into the grant that is available to help people, to go on-site and train you, or to go on-site and help you with pulling weeded books if that's what you need done. So we have help if people need it.
So we just wanted to make sure you knew about this technology bump that we have right now. Yeah. But definitely a bump in the road.
But now that the holidays are over, everything will change, right?
ever the opposite. Yeah, so. Okay. So we're a little bit behind, but we can maybe catch up.
I assume we can push back roadmap if need be.
Mm-hmm.
If need be. So I've kept that in mind, yeah. Okay. Because who knows how long this will take. So we'll move on to expired hold cleanup. Cheryl, you're up.
Okay, so this comes up every once in a while where somebody sends an email out and says, my item's expired, or the hold's expired, can you check your shelf, right? This comes up every once in a while. And what we're specifically talking about here are the things that are sitting on your hold shelf, most of which are probably your things, but some of which are not your things. They're from other libraries, and they are supposed to sit on your hold shelf for 5 or 7 or 10 days or whatever it is. And people were having a problem with people not sending them back to their libraries. They get lost. The longer they sit on a hold shelf, then they don't get checked back in, the more likely they are to disappear. So what I think the problem isn't so much that people aren't turning around and looking at the hold shelves. It's more of they don't think to run the report. There's 2 reports. There's one in Horizon that'll show you what's on your hold shelf and what's your items that have expired. But then there's a second report that you have to go to Web Reporter to get, and that one shows other people's stuff on your hold shelf. And that's the one I don't think to run and check. And that one, because you have to go to Web Reporter, right? It's not right in Horizon. You don't just pull up Serve Reports. So what I'm proposing here is basically twice a month. It's an automated script. This isn't me running the report and emailing it out at 9 in the morning. This is all on the server. This is all automated. It'll run that report and it'll email it out to whatever listserv, probably the automation contacts. And it'll have on there all the items that are expired holds. And then you have that right in your inbox on the 1st and on the 15th of the month. And for 95% of the situations, it's going to solve any problems because it's going to be right in your inbox and you're going to see it and you're going to look at your shelf and go, oh, I didn't realize that it expired yesterday. Let me check that in and send it along. And it'll eliminate that issue. But for those few times where that doesn't happen, where for whatever reason didn't pull their expired hold, they have 30 days to pull their, this is 30 days expired, right, which is a long time for an expired hold. So 30 days expired sitting on your shelf, at that point you're going to get an email from me or somebody at SELCO saying, what's going on here? Please send it back to the owning library. And if they still take no action at that point, then there is a financial motivation to do something about it. So, and that's number 3. After 45 days of being expired holds and no communication, then at that point we're going to reimburse the lending library and bill the borrowing library. Like I said, I don't think that'll get to that very often. But
can you add a penalty as well?
We didn't want to be punitive. We just want the materials to go down.
Actually, we did.
Did not.
Did not know. The whole idea of number 3 there, I think, made some of us uncomfortable. But
we talked about it simply in the sense of how punitive do we want to be, and the strong feeling of everybody in the room was not at all. We just want the items to get back to the lending library, and that's really all that's what everybody wants. So there's no penalty here. But unfortunately, we felt like we did need some kind of big stick that we could deploy if absolutely necessary, and we're sure it will never happen.
We have had a couple of libraries that have tried unsuccessfully to get their materials back from a borrowing library. And it really is one of those things where it tears at that gentle person fabric of our relationship when if you do not feel comfortable lending your taxpayer purchases to another library, then it's a ripple effect. So I do think it's important that the stuff that you and your staff have purchased for your libraries, if you are willing to lend it to another location, then that other location, in good conscience, should be getting it back to you. And if certain locations consistently don't get things back, it then starts making people unwilling to lend, and then we're in a world of hurt, because the reason that this consortium exists is to lend and to meet people's information needs.